Hey folks, and welcome to a daily rating special where I'm being held against my will. I thought for a Halloween special, I'd give a 6-hour lecture on Tolkien's Middle-earth, but Vin Daly had other ideas. Instead, we're going through the first films of what are now some of the most massive scary movie franchises we have. So Vin Daly will be rating and reviewing Halloween, directed by John Carpenter, Friday the 13th by Sean S. Cunningham, Nightmare on Elm Street by Wes Craven, Scream by Wes Craven, and finally Saw, directed by James Wan. It's a two-shoes nightmare. Oh, wait a second. What am I saying? It's going to be a blast as always, going through the first movies that spawned some of the biggest and most well-known scary movies we've got. It's a battle royale, too, to see which first film is best. And we'll also talk about if it's worth continuing to dive deeper into these massive franchises. So Vin Daly is taking us through it all, folks. So sit back, relax, and let's start the show! Mr. Vincent Daly, how are you doing over there?
Tommy boy.
My friend. How you
How's
doing?
It going?
It is going okay with me. How was your special spooky week?
I was waiting for it. I was wondering if you guys switching up from spooky. Great. I've been listening to John Carpenter music all week.
Oh, good. Get yourself. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Almost ran over some trick-or-treaters on the way over, legitimately. I was like, who's in the street? I was getting angry. I was like, Halloween. Put two in my head.
Okay, so and I think this is coming out. It is actually Halloween that this is coming out. So that's pretty cool. I think we timed it out right. I mentioned this. I mentioned this last week. Mm-hmm. I love that all of these movies were just open. We haven't covered them before.
Yeah.
It's all fresh on the site.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know. I like it, and I know you've been wanting or had this idea in your head
pretty much since last October.
Yeah.
Last October was a bit spotty as far as what we could fit in for like horror movie coverage. But this was an idea because it exactly came from we haven't rated not only these monolithic horror movies, on top of that is that they're all the first of the franchise, and these massive franchises, on their own right. I think this is also ripe for possibly revisiting a part 2. The 5 I came up with here, folks, are just a start. I think this 5 represents the 5 largest horror franchises, but definitely leaves out the more recent ones, mainly James Wan's kind of follow-up to Saw, being the Conjuring universe and Insidious. So that equally big, especially Conjuring, because it separates into so many little timelines and spin-offs. But I'm happy with this 5. And where I might have been embarrassed earlier in the podcast to admit I've never seriously seen these movies. I'm telling you, this was super enjoyable to watch. So, folks, if you have not watched any of these movies, even though the scores are, all over the place on this one.
I think as they should be.
Yeah. It's still worth a watch. Really, really worth a watch.
Yeah.
I had a great week watching these.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. And these are, and I feel like these movies are so big, everyone knows the names, where it still might be like, oh yeah, I know the deal, or
sure.
I know it's good, or I know the character already.
Yep.
It's so baked into like Halloween, October culture.
Oh, for sure.
Where I feel like people don't even need to touch it, and yet they get it. Mm-hmm. So it was good to. I mean, I did research on 4 of them. I watched Halloween. I did watch Halloween.
It's good.
And I even asked you. I was just like, should I watch all the? I mean, I can't. I was like, what do you want me to do here?
The answer was hard no. Hard no. I'm glad you watched Halloween, because at least as far as like kicking it off, it really does set a template of the type of stalker camera work, the type of following just right behind that is so connected to the visual language of all of these.
And American teen slasher film.
Sure. The teen element, too, is something that I don't know, it might be stupid to say, but I really wasn't expecting how teen focused it was. Mainly, I was confused because no one looks like a teen. I mean, even like Kevin Bacon in Friday the 13th.
And sometimes they are. I mean, even in our first, what is her name? Oh my gosh, I can't think of,
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't look like a teen, but in real life, she's 19 while filming.
Yep.
And then when did Texas Chainsaw Massacre come out?
I want to say 75, 74.
So that was that kind of first splatter film.
Yeah.
That really was a thing.
Absolutely.
These, would you, I don't know, what do you think about, this is almost like popcorn scary. Texas Chainsaw was
scary.
It's
scary.
Like scary.
Yeah.
Like threatening scary.
Yeah, not to buzzkill on these 5, but Texas Chainsaw really stands as the top. That was watching that, I was like, whoa, this is an incredible movie. And that's going back to an older episode, of course, folks, if you want to check that out. But when it comes to these, I agree with you, especially in like Scream's case. I would almost argue a comedy in a lot of ways.
And I think there's a lot of suspension of belief in these. They take liberty with them. Am I right in saying that? Where like Texas Chainsaw Massacre is just like you're in one tiny nowhere town.
Yes.
You're basically at one location, so it's almost like you could see it happening, kind of.
Yep.
Where there's a lot of screaming in neighborhoods and nothing is happening.
Oh, yeah. It's like where the rest of the neighbors.
Right.
And not to really shit on Scream. I will shit on Scream in a little bit, but that's a perfect example of just like this is supposed to be like a town-wide event, and we're just only seeing like a very small group of teens be affected.
And
by
that's
this.
where I just call it popcorn suspension of belief kind of slasher film.
Yeah.
Where Texas Chainsaw is horror, scary, kind of survival film.
Yeah. And almost covers its own ass as far as, logic problems. A lot of these, for better or worse, you're kind of wondering, just call the cops,
Oh, yeah.
With a lot of these, they slightly cover their ass and say, like, oh, well, the cops are pretty incompetent, or they don't care, or they're kind of desensitized. Each one has its own little excuse. Actually, going to Nightmare on Elm Street, what I really liked about that the most is, like, well, Freddy can't be caught by the cops, so that, he's in your dreams,
right.
So you can't do anything about it, but... That's where Texas Chainsaw Massacre was so good because it is just like truly in the middle of nowhere. There's no chance for help,
Yeah. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'm kind of excited to go through these. It is kind of known that Halloween sparked this, right? Like this genre.
Yeah,
seems
the
like everyone knows each other
transformation
sometimes,
from splatter to slasher.
Right. Okay, that's good. That's good. And then there's an. Again, I only watch Halloween, but just doing research, and we know these films. Kind of.
Right. Yeah.
There's always some overarching with the teen element, some sort of sexiness to the film, trying to definitely get the teens to add a little. There's something there that's a through line with these. I would say
absolutely. I mean, the only one that's maybe missing with is Saw. No, but there's still there's almost a sex scene in Saw. So yeah, no, you're right. I think that's maybe just understanding the medium of. Yes, these are rated R, but what is the demographic seeing them? Maybe, teen date night, that is, they're not going to be really paying attention to the film. So,
okay. So with that, Vin, any other opening notes?
No.
Any other thing you want to say, or we want to jump into this?
Heavy hitters here. So we can jump right into it.
I'm excited. I love that it's Halloween. This is a good time.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. So we're going to jump back to 1978. With the young John Carpenter. I think he might be late 20s, I want to say.
Oh, really? Wow.
I think late 20s or like very, very early 30s coming out with this. Anyway, this is the Halloween. Like I said, 1978. It's an hour and 30 minutes. Starring our, very, like we said, very young 19-year-old Jamie Lee Curtis. And let's jump in. Where do you want to start? How do you want to tackle this or these? And
well, I definitely would want to start with John Carpenter because I feel like
Behemoth.
Behemoth, and also where I was really happy with this week was I was able to do a deep dive on so many influential directors that we just haven't really touched on the podcast.
Right.
Well, many directors have infused their vision into Halloween as the franchise goes on, and we'll get into the timelines for a second. Halloween is probably some of the messiest sequels out of all these franchises. It really can't be understated how much this felt like a proper John Carpenter film. This marks only his third feature film. And everything from its expertly crafted stalker pacing to his beyond iconic theme for the film, Halloween instantly captured my attention watching this.
Yeah, I have to say, right off the bat, I was digging the sound, the feel of the film, even for how low budget it is, and it's doing something well here. Right, like literally 5 minutes in, I'm watching this, and I'm like, John Carpenter is nailing something here.
Yes,
you know?
Yes, he has such a laser focus on what he's trying to achieve in this film, and it's going to be tough to do a retrospective on all of John Carpenter because it's just very hit or miss. But it's when he has that focus is that John Carpenter really knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, I don't really have it in my notes or anything like that, but like talk about the quality of pumpkin carving increasing over the decades.
Oh, that's really funny. That's a great through line.
The pumpkin carvings in this look horrific, like bad, really bad. So maybe that's one thing. Society's been progressing according to the sophistication of pumpkin carvings over the years. Out of all of these, though, folks, I am probably most embarrassed. I've never actually fully seen this and kicking myself because it was pretty great. I'm a huge John Carpenter fan, but I think I stayed away knowing that comes with the caveat of really great movies side by side with horrifically bad movies. So forgive me if praise for this, or honestly, any of the films this episode is well-covered ground, but I was really excited to come across what I love the most in Carpenter's directing. I also had my mind blown with a crazy bit of trivia for the film. I'm glad you watched this one specifically because in the movie, they are watching a horror movie on TV. Actually, nearly every one of these films, probably except for Saw, there's a horror movie playing on TV, which is interesting. That movie in Halloween was 1951's The Thing from Another World. John Carpenter then goes on to remake the film as The Thing in 1982, a phenomenal movie.
Yeah, you're a big fan of that one.
Absolutely. It's probably his best film. Again, I'm super late to the punch on this, but this was like a mind-blowing moment of just like, did he know he was going to direct this? Was he manifesting this in his movie?
Or maybe he's just a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
That's probably what it was. I mean, he's probably just a huge fan.
It's unbelievable. The fact that he put that in his movie. I mean, that's how you get it done. Like, you do a nod to a movie if you really want to remake it yourself. So, and yeah, I just love that. Again, as The Thing being... I don't know, probably, if not without a doubt, my favorite John Carpenter film.
Right.
And really like an excellent, excellent movie. Halloween is the creepy stalker horror that was one step towards redefining the splatter subgenre into the slasher we all know so well. The psychotic but stoic killer Michael Myers is introduced to us as a child first, and then an escapee from a mental hospital where he can return to his home of Haddonfield for another bout of wreaking terror. We experience this terror through two characters mainly. Dr. Loomis, played by Donald Pleasance, a state-appointed psychologist on the hunt for Myers after his recent escape. And, of course, the iconic role of Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, the key to being an average hometown girl so anyone can imagine themselves in her position. I think the subtle but brilliant, I should say, decision is connected to the pacing in this. We are given a huge amount of time to digest the town of Haddonfield. Not only is 50% of the scares built up by the slow stalking of our soon-to-be victims, but we get very familiar with the town itself through these shots. The 3 blocks, 3 square blocks or so around Laurie's neighborhood is almost mapped out for us in the earlier parts of the movies, and I think it does wonder for how the suspense is capitalized by the end. I could see how someone could look at the slower parts of this movie as boring or just wanting to get to the slasher, like the approach Friday the 13th goes with, what I'll lovingly call the porno approach, that it's not about the story, it's about the action. But that's where I would emphasize this being about stalking as much as the kills. And I really mean it, like, it pays dividends. Our awareness of the actual physical location of Laurie's neighbors, where she goes during the babysitting. It's
very well mapped out.
Yeah. And there's a great scene where one of the boys goes to the window and he sees Michael Myers just silently at the other house. Mm-hmm. And it's like, not only is that scary because there really wasn't like a huge music sting with it, and it's kind of like, whoa, you stumbled on something with the little boy.
Yeah.
On top of that, I feel like our awareness of how close that is, the houses, the block she lives on, that's where it was really, paying off for me.
I thought and I like that. I like that it wasn't too big for its britches. Like, it's very basic, and I think it was really well set up.
Sure.
That notion that almost half the film is the stalker element, I liked it because it is a lot of the tension that you feel while watching the film. It isn't even through the action. It is through the suspense of the lead up to the action.
Sure.
So I thought it was really good. I don't know. For an hour and a half film, I almost found it to start to get repetitive.
Okay.
And kind of just treading water for like 20 minutes or half an hour.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Because it at some point you're just waiting for the crescendo a little bit.
Yeah.
And that was the only thing. It was just the iconic music, but it was really resting on the iconic music and the setup. The setup constantly. So I felt like there was a slowish kind of slog through the middle.
Yeah, this is a great example of Carpenter being his probably his biggest advantage doing his own music, doing his own scores on the synthesizer. At the same time, it's like it really is a crutch. It's almost like a John Williams level crutch of like, without the score, I don't know what this movie would be. It'd be very artsy, but it's just like, I don't know. The term I kept on circling back to is potential energy, like the potential of these stalking scenes to move into something scarier. In reality, it takes a while till we get to
kinetic energy.
Oh yeah, right. Exactly. But I think there is something there as far as it's what we always talk about on really good horrors of building dread.
Yeah.
What does dread do to the horror experience?
Yeah, and it was like that's why I said even with like in the first 5 minutes you like in the film.
Yeah.
So I don't want to say that he doesn't deliver well on that. I don't know. Maybe it just dragged a bit too much for me. Maybe I needed one more action scene mixed in there,
sure,
to kind of keep the juice fresh.
Yeah,
but regardless, very enjoyable.
Yeah. Also, just circling back real quick to our problems with logic. My big one here is like, how does Michael Myers steal a state-appointed car, and that's not just put on the radios? How is this state car not tracked down?
Yeah,
he's just driving around the neighborhood with it. It's like,
what? The area is not on lockdown as much as you think.
Yeah.
And it was, I will say though, for this film, I thought I was going to be rolling my eyes, and that whole suspension of belief thing, I thought was going to be way worse.
Yeah.
There's elements because you have there is something that's trying to happen. Like the doctor element that's trying to hunt him down after realizing he escaped. He's like on it.
Yeah.
He's actually a competent character, which in horror films I know you love.
Sure.
I feel like I would love if I watched horror films.
You're right. That would be the line if you did.
I was happy to see this wasn't just dumb teens.
Yes.
Going into a place with no windows and doors, and you know what I mean. Like I'm really glad to see actually some competence going on.
Sure. Yeah, and he really is right on his tail too.
Yeah.
I think that's the balancing act. I mean, Laurie is absolutely the main character, but at the same time, I don't know. Donald Pleasance, I believe he sticks with the franchise quite a bit going forward from this, or at least he's referenced or flashed back to in quite a bit. And his insight into Michael Myers, I don't know. I wouldn't call it necessarily a mystery because he's basically just kind of delivering the exposition over and over again.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
But it is key to the balancing act. We need a little bit of a release, plot A, plot B, even though it's the same neighborhood.
Yeah, agreed completely.
As far, if I had to, fall on the sword over why it is about stalking as much as it is about the kills, of course, look no further than the trademark shot of Halloween franchise, Michael Myers appearing in the background of a scene only to disappear once the audience has given enough time to notice it. That always comes with a wonderful little sting of music with John Carpenter on the synth, and I feel like much more than jump scares than I expected them to be. I expected them just to be jump scares, but often the stings, I don't know, they're either delayed sometimes, like that shot outside, they're delayed, or the stings themselves are just, I don't know, they weren't meant to like go boo. They weren't meant to startle.
I like that though. Yeah.
It's more so like just kind of announcing that he's like, oh, he's around.
That's exactly what
it's an active area for Michael Myers. It also takes a long time to see our first real kill in the movie. That first kill is really, really my favorite. And for each one of these, I found myself making note of one really dynamite scene that worked for me. That even though they may not be the most iconic for each of the first movies of these franchises, there was always one scene that was like, wow, man, that
kind of impressed by.
That took some vision.
Yeah.
The wrap up here, though, it's going to be a tough one to call heads or tails on if I would continue with this franchise. Everyone always says this movie wasn't meant to have all of its sequels, and I feel like this gives the biggest sequel bait out of any of those films, so I'm really confused by that. But whether I would continue watching the franchise or not, I don't know. I'm pretty meh on it. Let's take a look at some infographics. I got timelines for you, Tom.
I've got them here too. You go ahead.
Timeline for Halloween is probably the most confusing because we have the main timeline of Halloween 1 to Halloween 2.
Oh, are you trying to show me?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I've got them here too. I've got them. Oh, you made a chart there, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
We got infographics.
Wow.
We got infographics.
Fantastic.
Main timeline, we jump from Halloween 1 to Halloween 2, Halloween 4, 5, and then the Curse of Michael Myers is one timeline. At Halloween 2, that branches into H2O and Halloween Resurrection. Most recently, we've had remakes of the Halloween franchise.
Yeah, a redo of Halloween 2, and then we have another Halloween, and then Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends.
See, that's why the list itself of just the names does not help.
This is the most confusing thing ever.
Exactly. That's why we needed
What
an
a
infographic.
horrible. Okay.
Because it is real. I mean, granted, this is the most complex out of all these ones.
Okay.
Saw gets a little wacky with how much it plays with timey-wimey bullshit.
Right.
Of where it plays in the series.
This
but
naming
this is
is
the actual
atrocious. This naming is atrocious.
Yeah,
then.
this is your worst nightmare. Normally, the split is at Halloween 2. David Gordon Green, who did the 3 Halloween remakes most recently in the 2010s, that actually splits off of Halloween 1. So that is a direct sequel to this film. And then on its own island are 3 movies. On its own little island is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Apparently doesn't have Michael Myers or anything in it.
And that's 1982.
Yep.
We should say that the first Halloween, like we said, 78. The second Halloween 2, 1981.
Yep.
Immediately in 1982, it's Halloween 3.
Yeah.
Season of the Witch, and you said totally.
It's on its own island.
This is like when Sean
little dimension.
This is like when Sean Connery still tried to be Bond, and he
Yes!
made that weird diamonds are forever.
Absolutely. Degrees worse, magnitudes worse, but absolutely. And then finally, on its own little island as well, is the Rob Zombie Halloween movies, and there are 2 of those.
And which ones are those called?
That is just Halloween 2007 and Halloween
2009.
Yep.
Okay. And then we have Halloween once again in 2018. We bring Jamie Lee back.
Yes. 18 is the start of the Gordon Green trilogy.
And that's a reboot of the franchise?
No, it's actually a direct sequel. I don't know how palatable this is going to be in just an audio.
Oh, that makes okay, but
we'll definitely have to post these timelines, but
that makes sense because you have Jamie Lee coming back, so
Bingo.
It's like we're picking up with Jamie Lee.
Yep, and I don't know. I really don't know the fan reception of what that was in 2018. Just basically wiping out every possible Halloween but the first one in the canon of the franchise. Mm-hmm. But it's a doozy, folks. A whopping 13 movies with 3 to 4 to arguably 5 separate timelines. I wouldn't continue the main line of 5 movies. The sequel in 81 is done by Rick Rosenthal, who did the first Bad Boys film, so that kind of kills it for me. So that's dead. The next timeline branching off of 2 is H2O and Resurrection. I don't exactly understand the split of what's going on there. What is so pivotal in Halloween 2?
And why is it called Halloween H2O?
Yeah, but that's where I'm at here. Let's be honest. I'm not watching a fucking movie called H2O. Get real. That's so dumb.
I think Jamie Lee's in that one too.
Yeah.
It's Halloween H2O 20 years later. So H2O, it's like H20.
Worse.
If it's Halloween H20, Halloween 20 years later.
More belongs in the trash.
It's a lot going on.
Yeah.
It's a lot going on there.
The Rob Zombie films on their own little island, that's a probably no-go. I'm not really a huge fan of Rob Zombie's directing, at all. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think. What I've heard of those is, and much like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, they all get their 2000s gritty reboot, where it is trying to be as gritty as possible and dark, and those... The fact that they're on their own little island and they've been pushed aside by the 2018 trilogy that came out.
Right.
I
It
have
usurps
no
them.
interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no interest. Now, finally, you have that most recent David Gordon Green trilogy, which I would actually probably say yes to. I know those are a mixed bag. I don't know the exact ranking of them, but I believe 2 are good and 1 of them is like really, really horrifically bad.
Okay.
But I think I would just be curious enough to check them out and call heads or tails myself, and mainly that's because of what they do to continue off of just Halloween 1 specifically.
Right.
I don't have a lot of homework, and I can still watch something how the franchise has evolved.
Yeah,
with
okay,
that.
all right.
So, and that's the kind of, would I continue with this franchise? Mostly no. Spoiler alert, it's going to be mostly no on all of these. But with that said, we're going to go ahead and give Halloween 1978 a 72.
72. That's a great. I think that's a very good score for a film like
Yeah.
this. And I have to say, I was walking away positive on it. I
Yeah.
was actually surprised that it's like I didn't hate this film. I don't know if I need to see it again.
Sure.
Do I care to watch any of the others? Absolutely not.
Okay.
But
Fair.
again, I just walked in expecting it to be a certain type of schlock, and I got better than that.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
my head was high. My head was high.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure to get down to the hits of that schlock because up next is it really doesn't give you a lot to go on. It's all about the kills now.
Okay, and we should just notice Halloween. The reason why they kept the franchise going, by the way, is because the film would cost, I think, somewhere around $300,000.
Okay.
And it made $70 million.
Wow.
So just the turnover on that film was like all profit, essentially,
Yeah.
like all profit.
Yeah.
And that's actually all of these films today. These 5 films.
Yeah.
They all do very well.
I think that's
money making. And no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that wasn't in how I chose these films, but that could also be a criterion in itself of like what is the biggest variance between what they cost to make and how much money they raked in.
We have a winner.
Yeah.
There's a clear winner.
Really?
There's a clear winner on
Oh,
this.
awesome. I can't wait.
But for 1970 money or 1978 money, like 70 million reckoned it in. I don't have the inflation adjustments.
Sure.
The fact that it cost under $500,000 and you made 70 mil, really good, really impressive. And all of these are kind of impressive. You look at an Insidious these days where they make money because it's a cheap budget and they can all make 40 million or something like that.
Yep.
This is like to the nth degree. These are way above that.
Right.
So again, there's no question why we keep the sludge a-flowing.
Yeah.
But okay, all right. So any other notes? Or moving on?
No, we are moving on. Halloween is dead in the ground. I will hopefully never see Michael Myers again.
There you go. So we're 2 years later in the year 1980. This film is called Friday the 13th. Yet again, introducing characters and themes here. This is directed by Sean S. Cunningham. And I don't know if you wanted to start with him. I was seeing that...
Yeah, quite a production story on this one.
Yes. I was more so going for the director of Scream and Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven.
Yes.
His very first film, or one of his first films he did, the director of Friday the 13th, Sean S. Cunningham, helped produce it.
Yep.
So
yep.
everyone's connected here. Everyone's there's a little family.
Absolutely. There's a
which is-
serious chain link from each of these movies, each of these 4 movies.
Yes.
Really, the only one that is unfairly on its own island is Saw.
Saw, yeah.
But in that itself, like I said, could very easily lend to a part 2 using James Wan as the chain link to, future franchises. But all of these are very much, they are contemporaries of each other in a lot of ways.
All right, so Friday the 13th, 1980. You get into it any way you want, V.
Well, buckle in because it is the 80s now, and we ain't got time for any subtle horror about stalking. A 24-hour nightmare of terror, Friday the 13th marks the full transition into the slasher. The movie is a direct byproduct of our last film. After seeing Halloween, director Sean Cunningham famously put an advertisement out for Friday the 13th in Variety magazine before any actual work had been done for the film. Folks, if you listen to the podcast, then you know I care about the business of movie making as well as the movies and the art form itself. And this is what you would call a brass balls move. I mean, this is like a gamble of gambles, and talk about paying off for Cunningham.
So basically what happened, he was He faked that there was a movie coming out,
Yep.
and he needed the buzz to be there.
He literally just said, "What Halloween, spooky name. What's another spooky name for a day? Friday the 13th."
Wow. Okay.
Put out the ad, and that's it. Nothing else was done for it by the time he.
But
put
what
out
happened?
The
So
ad.
he puts out the ad, and was it only solely to get buzz, so
Yes.
he could take the buzz to shop for a price?
Bingo.
Okay.
Bingo.
Gotcha.
He has, I believe, the buzz as far as it was used for casting. It was used for initial funding.
Oh.
But it was a dirt cheap movie. He was in New York at a time. It was filmed in New Jersey.
Yeah, 550,000.
Yeah. After the shooting wrap, Cunningham was able to, because of this hype, create a bidding war for the film, pitting both Warner Bros. And Paramount against each other for the rights. Folks, in an episode that has plenty of examples of slick business decisions, this might take the cake. I mean, this might take like an all-time cake. If you listen to interviews with these directors, they're all very cynical. They're all very jaded for what they left behind on the table. But I feel like they're in this little corner of cinema, of horror movies, of slashers.
Yeah.
It is kind of business first. They were doing these as money-making ventures. It was not for the high art of horror or anything like that. It was to turn a profit. When it comes...
Okay. Well, these guys love horror, though. Like, this is what they do.
Yeah, that's true.
They do live in this element. Like, I don't want to write them off as...
Not creatives or...
Like, they care about the properties
Sure,
and stuff,
Sure. But I think when it comes to it, as far as like, I don't know, there is a cynical attitude, especially during this time. This is before any sort of mainline star was even attached to horror movies.
Yeah.
So having that as an element here, I just feel like Cunningham was really able to strike while the iron's hot. I mean,
he did.
so
Yeah,
hot
yeah,
in
he
fact, like he walked out of the theater and got this done. I mean, that's how you get it done. This successful story would prove to be, unfortunately, a flash in the pan for Cunningham's directing career, however. With little interest in the countless sequels to spawn from Friday the 13th, he wouldn't continue on with the original films that sadly seem to be comprised of no-name stumbles as far as directing talent with it. Prior to directing this movie, however, is yet another connection to our special. Like you said, Tom, coming up in the business and working on several films together with him was none other than Wes Craven, his much more successful counterpart in the long run. Both will have a rough patch in their directing, but I found it very interesting how talent crossed paths in this little corner of filmmaking. Even though I believe Wes Craven was West Coast, I think he was LA based, and Sean S. Cunningham was New York based. But interesting little connections all over these movies, which just, once again, made for like a genuinely fascinating week to kind of unpack and get myself up to speed as much as, writing these reviews and whatnot. Friday the 13th is a slasher mystery focused on kills and give raw violence the center stage. Like a porno, it understands what the audience wants, and it isn't too concerned with fleshing out the story. Like many, many people say in the film, and one of my most enjoyable pieces of how hammy this film was people just yelling out, "Camp Blood? They're opening that place again? Camp Blood?" Like, that is constantly, just people are like birds. They're just like, "Camp Blood?" Love it. That's right. After countless killings going unsolved, the writing is on the walls with what will happen next. A group of teen counselors are tasked to reopen up Camp Crystal Lake, all of which do not look like teens. And I really mean that. There's something in the water in the 80s or in the 70s. And even if we do get a super young Kevin Bacon, I mean, I don't know. Only until Nightmare on Elm Street do they actually start looking like teens to me. I mean, it's not as like the degree of like we talked about with like super old silent films,
right?
Or the Fred Astaire movies where it's like you see pictures of like the Great Depression kids, and it's like, whoa, these kids are old. There's a little bit of that here, but not too bad. While their interpersonal relationships might seem like the focus of the story, it doesn't really make an ounce of difference when our large cast starts dwindling fast. The real story is the mystery of Camp Crystal Lake itself and what happened to earn it the grim reputation held to this day. I would say on a pure level of enjoyment, I do like some of the hammy elements here thrown into the story. That legend of Camp Blood the old homeless man that's like a crazy kook, pretty much anyone giving exposition of the story, all were kind of enjoyable because, I don't know, I mean, it wasn't that... I don't know. There was just something so simple and straightforward about it. I liked how, like, cartoony it would be that this town is just obsessed with this legend, this urban legend of Camp Blood.
Cartoony is probably a good word for this one.
Yeah.
A lot of cartooniness.
Absolutely. I'm not saying the mystery setup had a lot of depth, but I think I was able to just enjoy it like a bad version of a Hitchcock movie. This really did feel like a derivative Hitchcock movie.
Totally makes sense.
Yeah.
That's funny. I like that. There's a selling aspect. There's something that works there.
Absolutely. And it certainly counts for the psycho-like soundtrack with this, with constant high strings being played. This goes, I don't know what it would cost to make a soundtrack like this back in the day, but it feels like there is simultaneously more production value around the soundtrack, but also on top of that, very generic soundtrack that it does sound like a total copycat of this Hitchcock style that we studied earlier in the year. Usually my issue with these films, though, it is character logic, and there are certainly plenty of character logic issues here, both for our killer and on top of that as well, the camp counselors soon to be slain. I think the important thing for me, though, is that you can't forget it is about the kills directly. This is about the slashing. But there are just a lot of goofy moments where either our killer is setting up, like, I don't know, almost theatrical type of scares that, like, they're not meant to scare the audience. They're meant to scare the character in the world. So it's just like, what are we doing here? What's going on? And of course, I mean, this is the camp counselors, the brain dead logic, the cabin in the woods vibe. We've talked about plenty of times.
Yeah.
And that's where this falls short, is that it's just really, really stupid decisions. I will say an advantage, though, is how fast the kills come. I think this story can only be so good because it is capped by how little we know about victims or stakes, but undoubtedly the advantage is the pacing moves along at a clip. There really is, there's something to it there that, I don't know, it's a machine. It's really got like almost a beats per minute of just like, we don't get too far along any length in the story without getting a kill, which is, I think, again, important.
Yeah, I think that if this film is going to be that stupid teen killer, total suspension of belief, it needs to be this.
Yeah.
Like, I can't take its time probably like Halloween does, which really takes its time.
Oh, sure. And
the setup is like we said, half the film is the setup.
Yeah.
This needs to be just action.
Yeah.
No potential all kinetic on this one.
Absolutely. I also wasn't too hot on this year's copycat of this film, In a Violent Nature, but I think
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah. It was weird watching this because watching In a Violent Nature, I really didn't like for a variety of reasons. We have a whole review on that, folks, if you want to go back to it. But it may be dumb to say, but somehow this does its own formula better. You think with the advancements in gore, you think with the hindsight of what these movies turn into and what that formula is, that In a Violent Nature would almost be the superior product to these original Friday the 13th. But there's still something here that I feel like it came out better than even a modern version of what the story was trying to be.
Your big problem with In a Violent Nature was how slow it was. Like, that is mostly stalking in that film.
Yeah, true.
And that's what this isn't. I remember you saying specifically you needed more kills in that film.
Yeah, true. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe I was just satisfied with my brain was preoccupied. I was on the hamster wheel of this movie.
Yeah.
So those special effects, though, around the kills, I would say are a real big selling point of this film, but also, unfortunately, a black eye for it. The gore work in this is pretty decent despite how early on it is, and early on, obviously, being 1980 on the dot. This is largely thanks to industry legend Tom Savini, who we have crossed paths with on our zombie special. Tom Savini worked with Romero on Dawn of the Dead and basically, pretty much every movie in that franchise. Savini has a talent of creating great close-up shots, unnerving close-up shots of his gore, that if you look at them too long, you might notice some flaws, like mismatched skin tones and different things like that, or maybe like an overly rubbery texture to the cut, but are so shocking when they work. They really work. All over this film, was I actually scared? No.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a hard hurdle for all of these films because, if anything, going back to them as an adult, I lose that, I don't know, kid in blockbuster aspect of you see it on the shelf and you're like, whoa, I've heard about this movie, the legend of it. But when it comes down to it, I mean, there is something that Savini is able to make some really, really compelling kills in this. There's one with an arrowhead that's used, and it's just like, whoa, like actually shocking. The issue, however, I have with this is the editing to the film. I don't know if there wasn't confidence in the rating of this. I don't know if possibly, I did a lot of research in this, but possibly if this was tied to a version that I was watching. They are constantly fading to white and cutting away from those violent moments. Maybe that's done strategically to get away from those moments where it's like, those practical effects aren't holding up. The camera's too fixed on it. You're going to see that it's fake. But at the same time, it was cutting way too early that it felt like it's almost every time I was like, wait, what? Show it more,
So maybe it's one of two things. One, either it was too much gore, like you said, they needed to backtrack because maybe they were getting the NC-17, or I guess back then was maybe rated X.
Sure.
Or maybe it was also just bad editing.
Yeah, maybe it was just bad editing. I did a lot of research into this, and what's funny is that I don't know which one it is. I think it is Friday the 13th 7.
Jesus.
I know, yeah. This is how deep I am. I have timelines on all of these. I think it's in 7 that either Savini comes back or they had really great gore work, but they had to cut away from all of it. They don't even show an ounce of blood.
Wow.
I don't know if that was obscuring my kind of search and my research of finding if this film had that same problem, but it's a little bit of a black eye and also a big praise because I feel like this is just 2 years later already a pretty significant jump in special effects work for the industry, no less horrors. But on top of that as well, it's like it's its biggest strength, but they cut away from its biggest strength. I really needed to see, I don't know, some Evil Dead level of gore. Really don't hide away from it at all. Especially with the objective of this film being kills first, was a bit disappointing. I have to say, it's also another embarrassing area where I'm going to show how much I really haven't seen this movie. But the ending kind of got me. And for spoilers, of course, we won't talk about it either. But watching this, I got so tripped up in my research of the timeline and my research of what the franchise turns out to be that I actually kind of got I confused myself in what the twist was going to be, and it actually kind of came off as a legitimate twist to me, which was
that's really funny.
Just again, so great to actually experience. So I was really
that's
happy.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, folks, the wrap up on this, it has one of my favorite endings out of all of these, but encased in a very meh movie. The question of would I continue watching the franchise? I think almost entirely no.
How many are there?
Let me pull up the infographic. Let me pull this up. Actually, there's one I don't have. Yep, it's this one. So this actually merges with the Nightmare on Elm Street timeline. I know.
Oh no, I knew about that though.
Yes, because when we were growing up, it was Freddy versus Jason.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So this is our timeline. We basically go in a straight line for the OG from 1 to 7. We get a split after 7 into Jason Goes to Hell and then Freddy versus Jason. And then it both reconverges onto the normal timeline with Jason X.
Which came out in 2001.
Yes.
Which was technically film number 9, I want to say.
Oh, really?
6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yep.
So this 10th Jason X.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
But you're saying from the first Friday the 13th all the way to the 7th is
Straight.
technically within the same timeline.
Yeah,
so you
straight.
can just keep on watching.
Yep.
Okay, and that spans the years of 1980 to 1988 then.
Yep.
Oh my God, that's right, because it's 81. That's right. They were like Bonds in the original.
Oh, yeah.
They were 1 year after another.
Absolutely.
80, 81,
and that's what I
82,
mean, like
80,
with the money making
wow.
aspect of this. I mean, there's very, this. Granted, Cunningham is not a part of it, but these were sequel to death. We have 12 entries total this time, but a lot more straightforward. Like I said, that part 1 through 7, all main timeline, and look to just get progressively worse.
It might be the 8th film too. Also.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it's the first 8 are on the same timeline.
Wow. All of that is culminating in part 7 for Jason Takes Manhattan, a film I hold a real big grudge against despite not seeing it because it gives the In the City 80 sequel a bad name.
Oh, okay.
And I got to look out for my boy Predator 2, of course. So.
Wait, okay, so the 8th film, yes, is Jason Takes Manhattan.
Yes.
So that is separate.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No. Same.
Okay, so that's the first 8 films. Okay.
Absolutely. We get a brief deviation with Jason Goes to Hell and Freddy vs. Jason, which splits the timeline mostly because, like in Alien vs. Predator, these matchup films,
right,
is like how do you put this in the canon of the franchise? And I'll kind of comment on that with our next one because I don't know. I mean, I feel like I need to talk about Freddy a little bit first. It all comes together, though, folks, for Jason X, commonly known as Friday the 13th in space. My interest in this very clear trash is super, super surface level, and it's for David Cronenberg acting in it, apparently.
Oh my God, yeah, no, he does. He's one of the main characters.
Yeah.
David Cronenberg's one of the main characters.
It's like, who put a gun to his head? Who did this to this man?
Wow.
Or did he do it to himself? So yeah, that's probably the only one that's a green light for me because I can only imagine that's probably a so bad it's good watch. Jason X.
Jason in space, yeah.
Yeah. The last is our 2009 gritty remake, which is actually uses this first one as a soft springboard.
Reboot.
Yeah. It uses that first one, and then this is technically the sequel to it. And once again, my comment almost on all of these 2000s remake, reboots, gritty reimaginings is that I don't have an interest in them because they've been abandoned by the studios and the owners of this property themselves. So that can only tell me that they're only that good.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So with that said, we're going to go ahead and get Friday the 13th, 1980, a 51.
51%.
A little cheeky, but like I said,
it's a little cheeky.
I debated, it deserves to be put in the 40s probably, but there was something there. I feel like it
was that ending, huh? It was that ending that swooped in and surprised you.
It actually got me. But there's I think the 51 kind of balances. I mean, granted, that's that is the non-commit score from for the daily ratings,
right.
But there was something there that I felt like it needed to have a sliver in the good side of this because I think it understood what it was so purely.
Okay, all right. Well, 51%. I like this. I like that. And honestly, I kind of feel like if you at all have any interest in horror films or whatever, I wouldn't be surprised if this would split 50 and 50. Ask 100 people. I bet 50 would like it, 50 wouldn't.
Sure. Sure. I think why I was sweating it is because, like, you look at Metacritic for this first Friday the 13th, and it's got like a 20.
It's a 22,
so
yeah.
Like, oh boy. But I don't know. I think, watch this movie. There's something to it. There's something to it, I think, even for maybe diehard fans of the franchise.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. Well, we're going to take a jump here. It's 1984. This is A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I was enjoying getting into the research of the production of this and how this kind of came to be.
Yeah.
We mentioned his name earlier. The director.
Wes Craven?
Yeah, Wes Craven is a director. He's a director for our next one, too. But he is almost like I don't want to say he's the James Wan of the 80s, but he is very much in this industry.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's not bad, right?
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Nightmare on Elm Street, again, everyone knows the name. The character spawned from this, but jump into it. I don't know where you want to start with it.
Sure. Well, when your slasher has been done to death, 4 years later, and every kill predictable and every camp counselor idiotic, all you need is some imagination. Folks, this is the franchise I was actually scared of as a kid.
Okay, so you had some knowledge about it.
Yeah. I more so specifically stayed away from this franchise.
Wow.
Where others I just never kind of got around to seeing. And growing up, I think it's also important to note, I kind of have this black hole in big horror franchises because I really was only into horror when I was getting into my 20s. I was definitely a scaredy pants, growing up.
Right.
So covering these old horror classics, never something I wanted to do.
I don't know if I knew that.
Yeah.
I always kind of thought you were a horror kid.
Well, we always shared the same type of experience, like way, way young. We never knew each other at this point, but you always said you were scared of the Uruk-hai being born in Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah.
Same thing. I had to close my eyes. I was like crying in the theater.
Yes,
okay. So that's like the horror tolerance that we're both starting with. I've fallen down the dark path.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Man, did you put work in then in your 20s? Because your knowledge, more than anyone I know. I mean, Christ, we have a movie podcast, but even before we said why we started Daily Ratings, such an interest in films. But like you were hitting. By the time I got to know you, you were into horror stuff in high school, though.
That's true, and technically, I was into like Alien and Predator, just as campy.
Sci-fi. Yeah. But you were, I guess, that's true. Sci-fi was always your number one.
Yeah,
and horror was kind of number two. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, as an adult, I'm in love with the concept, and just wishing it was wrapped up in a better movie, more so than any of the movies this week. I really, really was just dying to say, man, if I had a chance at directing Nightmare on Elm Street, I feel like I could do a knockout job. I feel like this movie captures something so actually scary, the concept of nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, going into our dreams is just so electric. And unfortunately, it's just like, it's once again wrapped up in like not a great movie. Like it's got a lot of flaws to this movie.
See, that's the thing. Everything, I love the premise of the film. This is, again, he was taking stuff from his childhood here. The idea, did you know about how he came up with the idea? There were a few stories that came out in the Los Angeles Times of immigrants that came over from Asia and like Cambodia when there was massacres going on in Cambodia, and they came over as refugees here, but were haunted, and so many of them were getting nightmares at night. And then a few of the men, there were multiple stories of the men dying in their sleep while having the nightmares. Wow. And that's what spawned the idea to kind of just like, let's have a Halloween or Friday the 13th in your dreams. Yeah. And then the character Freddy Krueger. Let's think about it for a second.
I didn't even know where you were going.
But Fred Krueger was an actual bully that bullied Wes Craven in school.
As far as the name?
Yes.
Wow.
So,
did not know that.
There was an earlier project. The first film or the first film he did that Cunningham, our last director, produced for him. I think the bad guy, or there was a bad guy in that one called Fred Krug or something.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was pulling from stuff. Something had happened with there was an old man walking on his street, and he looked at the old man, and the old man looked at him, and then it spooked him, and there was something with that.
Yeah.
And that was like his inspiration for Freddy Krueger as well.
That's so funny because there's a shot like that in Scream, then, which he goes on to direct.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
Wow. Interesting.
So this is coming from a really interesting place, and kind of creepy place. Again, there was these story of these men dying from their nightmares of in the countries that they were living in.
Really fascinating.
It's a shame to hear about the execution.
Yeah, it's still good, but just like, man, it's still so much like. It's got a bunch of black eyes on this one.
I was most excited to hear about this one.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Run wild with it.
Its skyrocketed success earned New Line Cinema the nickname "The House That Freddy Built." Out of all the central villains this week, Freddy might have taken the crown for that same reason as well. As I mentioned in our last review, Wes Craven's career has had a lot of overstep with Sean Cunningham, but proves to be the more successful out of the two in the long run. Starting with the Hills Have Eyes franchise, Craven shows his splatter films jump over the hurdle from fun, spooky movie to actually scary in a lot of ways. He's also become interesting because so far this episode, the franchises have never benefited from their original creator returning to the franchise among the countless sequels to Spawn. Craven will stick with Scream 1 through 4, so that's not really the case I'm looking for. In fact, the one piece here I'm looking for is in 1994, where Wes Craven returns to direct New Nightmare, the 7th film in the franchise, which, once again, a little bit of an anomaly. And from what I hear, New Nightmare is unfortunately a mixed bag, but that is the one I'm most excited to check out after the fact of this.
And that came out how long after?
That was in 94, so 10 years on the dot after. And the basically 2 through 6, all done by different directors, all done by like plug and play type of directors for this franchise. So... but it's only after he jumps ship to the Scream franchise to try something new that we'll kind of see how his career really pans out. Nightmare on Elm Street is the nightmare-fueled supernatural slasher with nowhere to hide, not even in your dreams. When a group of teens all start having the same dream, suspiciously with the same sweater-wearing man with knives on his fingers, bodies start dropping in this little town. Nancy is the main focus, played by Heather Langenkamp, who, funny enough, got her start as an extra in Rumblefish from Coppola, which we covered a couple weeks back.
Fun.
Yeah. When the first of their friend group dies, the adults scramble to find an answer to the apparent crime, but the kids know something hunts them that cannot be caught. Out of places to turn, Nancy starts desperately looking for answers for the origins of this cursed Freddy Krueger, and finds more of a story than she or anyone watching the film expected. When she realizes no one can protect her in the one place Freddy shows up, she has to confront him in her dreams. I think one piece here, and I'll probably say this for our big wrap-up as well, but one piece here is that if you look at all of these movies, there is a crime element at play. Sometimes that crime element is addressed directly in the genre of the film. Saw is a great example of that. Very much a crime thriller horror showing an ongoing investigation of Jigsaw. But in the same way, all of these franchises are dealing with cops in a different way, mostly by either dumb or incompetent cops or non-caring cops. Here, there is a built-in buffer of that logic. There is a built-in solution, an antidote to the poison of why don't they just call 911? It's because Krueger is in your dreams. They can't be helped. So when watching this film, I was saying I had a lot of problems with the teen element of this. The fact that teens are trying to solve this problem when they should be tapping someone else to get in the ring. They really need to stop thinking they're so independent. Nancy in this is ridiculous of the length she goes to handle things on her own terms without informing people of what the hell is happening to her, and very frustrating for that reason. But that's where upon really sitting on this film and reflecting on it, I think it's worth it because, yeah, there might be some logic issues. Yeah, it might be annoying to have such a teen-led horror, but man, is it great because there really is nowhere to hide. He's in your dreams. Yeah. There's no tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, can you help me out with this? I'm going through some shit."
Right, or go to the neighbors or call you said, call the cops. It's
exactly.
Classic. Yeah.
So I think there is there's a subtle brilliance in that move there. Also, like I said, this was a franchise I was actually scared of growing up. I can't say I was really, really scared of this, but as someone who has suffered from sleep issues all of their life, when I was a kid, this was a no-brainer to stay away from, literally being nightmare.
That totally made, oh my gosh,
literally.
Yeah.
But as an adult, there was just still something here. Not able to scare me, but definitely unnerving to this. I think the kills are just so inventive. They're inventive. The victim is helpless, and it's kind of actually horrifying when you know that they can't turn to anyone. And things really get kicked off when the first victim dies, where throughout the film, Freddy will taunt her body in future nightmares to future victims. The scenes with this are really, really phenomenal. Like, actually, like, whoa, like, what the hell? Really, really scary. I love that the only escape from this that the teens kind of see is depriving yourself of sleep. Which in itself kind of gives a dreamlike state to the film. The whole time Nancy is just popping caffeine pills and drinking coffee. It's great.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I don't know, it's a little Stranger Things-y. It's so 80s, and it's like, I don't know, they're trying to beat the monster by staying awake. Like, what is the logic there? But it works.
I like it. No, yeah.
And damn, you nod off for a second, and Freddy is there. I think this is very close to striking the magic of original Exorcist. I know it's gonna be a lot big praise. Easy. I'm gonna back off the gas a tiny bit here. Why I compare it to the original Exorcist is that the early parts of the film, it shows them taking the steps to work through the problem. These characters want to believe this is connected to anything but the supernatural. They want anything but the supernatural to be the answer. And the turning point in the film is, well, it has to be supernatural then. I think this teen-lit aspect is where it gets a little bit tough, because the lore that gets interwoven makes it a lot cheaper, a lot campier for no real good reason. And even if that's what it's aiming for, I feel like, again, boy, give me the wheel, give me the keys to the car. I feel like, I don't know, I was very passionate about, brainstorming ideas this week about, my dream Nightmare on Elm Street. The fact that by the end, Nancy is reading the anarchist cookbook to booby trap her room shows you the type of campy 80s direction this is going in.
It's kind of sick.
Yeah, exactly. Good and bad when it comes to it. I would say the fact that I have any notes around acting is a great indicator for the quality of this movie, and a great turnaround for where this special will go. There are plenty of still dumb moments in the logic. Like I said, any moment Nancy has a chance to explain herself or share pivotal information she's discovering about Freddy, she just acts moody or dismissive.
She's playing it close to the chest.
Yeah.
Keeping her cards close.
Or maybe she's just tired because she's like, I think the day count is like 11 days without sleep in this. It's just very frustrating. But casting, I thought, was pretty solid. Robert Englund gives us our first real performance among our slasher villains, Freddy being a huge personality on screen.
Yeah.
Freddy really, frankly, wipes the floor with all of our slasher killers.
Well, Mike Myers is supposed to be basically a mute.
Yes.
And not do anything.
Yep.
And kind of Jason as well, correct?
Yeah. It's supposed to be some sort of, the movies hint as some sort of kind of mental disability.
Right, yeah.
Causing this.
But this, he's supposed to be, not flamboyant, but he's supposed to be a character.
Absolutely.
Supposed to be a character.
Absolutely. Flashback to our Tim Burton episode, and we spoke about Johnny Depp's first, kind of debut role, what made his first impact. But the truth is, this is technically the first.
It's big for him.
Yeah, it's not like he's, a non-character. He's the boyfriend of Nancy, so has a lot of screen time. Folks, I have to admit, I've had a Bruce Lee special half-baked for about a year now, actually probably coming up on a year.
Longer than a year, yeah. Longer than a year, I think.
But seeing John Saxon, who I only knew from Enter the Dragon, was a little treat. And one more connective thing to maybe a part 2 of this, or our existing episode on the Insidious franchise. And even though it was only for one scene, Lynn Shay from the Insidious franchise is here as the teacher, so she's definitely got some horror roots in her acting career. Too bad the Insidious movies are garbage.
Poo-poo.
Yeah. I got some quick notes from music on this one. I definitely loved how synthy this was. Very 80s.
I wanted to go. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was
just going to say, did you know what one of, like, the inspiration?
No.
So there's another inspiration for whatever reason that triggered him to do this film. And that was the song Dreamweaver.
Oh, really?
Apparently he heard Dreamweaver and, like, it's just like, I gotta do this.
Interesting.
This is what Wikipedia says.
Oh, okay. Fair.
And then it also says that he drew some of like synthesizer in the song Dreamweaver and carried it into the film.
Interesting. That's cool. I mean, honestly, I think the soundtrack for me is going for that Carpenter style very directly, especially the stings to it, the synth stings. But I don't think they work half as well because they are surrounded by a very loud soundtrack all the way through. I think a magic to that original Halloween soundtrack, Carpenter is using piano for most of it. There's not a lot of soundtrack to it.
Yeah.
So that when we get this foreign synthesizer noise that comes out of nowhere, it really is a sting to, the audience.
Yeah.
Here, it's definitely trying the same thing. It just kind of gets lost in
too heavy.
Overall loud soundtrack. It loses the master stroke that Carpenter had by really controlling the whole thing. So.
You can really play with the film.
Yeah.
That can really play with the film big time.
Absolutely.
Especially with this, where you need to have those low moments that gets you restless. Oftentimes with scary movies, it's music that takes away from you really having an emotional reaction to the film. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for me, because especially with modern day films, because I have such a problem that music is just filler now, and it just like there's something disconnected. There's something that you feel disconnected to the film with. That's, I will say, with Halloween, there's so many quiet moments that it lets you get uneasy.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Where sometimes music is a little bit too in your face and trying to tell you to feel a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can affect a film in a poor way.
Yeah. And again, it's just the control Carpenter had over having the absence of music.
Yeah.
And when he wants to implement it.
Really, that thing was down to the basics.
Yeah.
That film and that music
down.
was, yeah.
Absolutely. There is a nursery rhyme song about Freddy sung throughout the film that is really stupid, like excessively stupid. I'm not going to sing it, but I'll read it for you, Tom. It goes, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, grab your crucifix. 7, 8, gonna stay up late. 9, 10, never sleep again. I mean, just like awful. Like, the fact that children are singing this, there's really no explanation. Like, Freddy's not mind controlling these children or anything like that. It is ridiculous. Just the absolute worst. I would say all of these are worth watching in order, and where I would almost directly recommend, regardless of scores, folks at home, you doing the same and watching these movies. You've seen them before, either, wherever you land on that, is seeing how spectral effects progress in year to year. There are a lot of excellent special effects here, and most importantly, no cutaway edits. The wall protruding with a figure crawling behind it is super iconic. We'll actually see, plenty of films in the 90s try to do the same thing. Anytime Freddy self-mutilates to scare his victim is really startling and pulled off with awesome special effects. Like, they all look like amazing.
Word.
My favorite kill by far is the bedroom scene with a gushing fountain of blood. I'm not sure if they designed that whole set upside down to get the effect or just had really good air pumps. I'm not sure, but it looked great. And just so many of these reminded me of more of the supernatural spin. I think that's what might have been missing from, I don't know, what actually scared me as a kid, what I think is scary now as an adult. The slasher, the stalker, yes, it's scary to imagine that, but supernatural takes it to a level that is uncontrollable, is beyond our control. And so many ways it reminded me of Poltergeist in how the house will transform and amped up in such a great way. Again, there's actually, I think it's the first kill in the film that is just done in such like a genuinely terrifying way. The person in the room doesn't know what to do, and I feel like it's a brilliant scene because we don't know what we would do. No one knows what they would do if they saw this happening in front of them. So I say the wrap up here, not a great ending here. Really shits the bed. Has a little nighttime accident and it's in its own story, and kind of ruins a lot of what it had going for it. But so much of this, I think, just really hits. And like I started with, I just wish it was just wrapped up in a better movie. Would I continue watching the franchise? No. I mean, no infographics this time. There really is a... one, it's a shared timeline with the Friday the 13th. being the only break from just a straightforward timeline, being the matchup film with Freddy versus Jason. We have 9 mainline films, and like I said, much like Friday the 13th, is a lot more straightforward. 1 through 6 all seem to be on the same page. More kills, more lore about Freddy, which that's actually what I don't want.
No, you kind of want to just keep him.
Yeah. Keep him the nightmare.
Yep.
I think that's also where the ending, Nancy goes looking for answers in the real world. I guess you got to have that in the story, in the script, but there was something there that, I don't know, keep him surreal, keep him, without answers. I think that's much scarier. I would say beyond my interest in the type of creative kills they pull off in 1 through 6 or 2 through 6, I really don't care for whatever lore they come up with. And I hear it's very bad. I mean, Freddy goes from actually terrifying to his catchphrase being bitch. Like, he'll end his...
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah, he'll end his taunt with bitch. It's just like, no, I'm good. I'm good on that. Like I said, though, in 1994, Wes Craven comes back to the franchise to do New Nightmare, and again, there's a lot of mixed
And is
feelings.
it called Wes Craven's New Nightmare?
Yeah.
That's the name of the film.
Isn't that awesome?
It's cool.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a pretty ballsy
It has nothing
move.
to do with Freddy or Nightmare on Elm Street, but
True.
It's him coming back and making an ode to the OG, kind of.
No, it's actually still the sequential 7th film. So it's using all the lore that was built up. It's not a reboot or anything like that. I think that's probably where it's probably bad, because there are 6 films he hasn't controlled, or 5 films he hasn't controlled.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of interest in watching that one. I hear it gets a bit meta, which might be a step towards the tone of horror we get in Scream. That's both a good and a bad thing, but I don't know. I think on a very surface level, I think it's a very ballsy move for Wes Craven to come back and make such a stamp on the franchise to call it something entirely new. I kind of like that.
No,
in
for sure.
the elevator pitch of it. Like I commented on in last review, we have that Freddy and Jason convergence in hell, and apparently that continues in a comic book that includes the Evil Dead franchise as well. So I think that's just going to be a no-go. I think that little island of the timeline, the fact that we have 3 different franchises mixing in, I'm not.
It's too much. It's too much.
It's too much. And once again, we get a 2010 gritty remake on its own little remake island, and I see really no reason in covering those and no desire to watch those. But I can't tell you how much I really did love this movie, but it just has so many flaws. I think this one I wanted to give a much, much bigger score to, because I feel like, I don't know, I was attached to it in a different way. I see the potential for this in a different way. I have to fall somewhere in the middle, because it really is. It has a lot of flaws to it. With that said, we're going to go ahead and give A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, a 66.
Wow, 66, pretty good score, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, not okay, all right. Well,
I wanted to give it in the 70s, but again, it's just, I don't know.
Listen,
every time
66 for this film, I think it's very good. Like, that's better than I thought, honestly.
True. It's just every time Nancy lied to her mother, and then the door closes and she goes underneath her bed and pulls out 2 coffee pots to stay awake. There was just something there. I was just like, oh my God, I don't know. I don't know where this lands. So.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, 66 for A Nightmare on Elm Street. All right, let's take a jump to 1996 now. We're finally in the 90s, and we're with the same guy. We're still with Wes Craven, director. This really is
a big hit.
It's a big hit, and this one and Saw, these are continuing and almost never stopped. I know there was a bit of a gap with Scream, but like Scream 7 is in development.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
We're probably going to have to cover it.
And Scream 6 did like well in theaters.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
it was a successful reboot.
It was weird that it actually worked. When so many times it's a failure.
Absolutely. And continuation, not really a reboot.
Right. So like I said, it's the original Scream, 1996. It's just under 2 hours. I think this is our longest film. Yeah, it is. It's our longest film of the show.
I didn't even take notice of that. Wow. Interesting.
So, Vin, I don't know, again, where do you want to start with it? Let's jump into it. The OG Scream.
Well, by the 1990s, the slasher had probably gone through every iteration possible, including Wes Craven himself reinvigorating the genre with our last film. Long before meta commentary and self-referencing scripts were all the rage, Scream came along giving a fresh perspective on its horror. not by reinventing the wheel, but by leaning into the genre tropes that were so tired out over the last 3 decades. For a subgenre that always seems to be putting horror movies playing in the background to set the mood, that idea is pretty clever. However, I think I enjoyed these little production details more than I enjoyed the actual film. In fact, I kind of hated Scream. I felt this movie was very annoying, and
The dumbest.
Yeah,
As far as the characters are the dumbest. You said it's almost borderline comedy.
Yeah, it is. It was my least favorite by far this week, and I just there was something I struggled so much to, even though it's probably the most well made out of all of these. I don't know where the budgets kind of come into play, but it does feel like a well made movie. It's just I don't know. Was not connecting with it, and if anything, was like actively annoyed by this movie. Wes Craven was reluctant to direct this initially, but after nearly 10 years of hit-or-miss projects outside of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, he needed something to redefine himself. Honestly, the more pivotal figure here is writer Kevin Williamson, especially for how much the script is key to the experience. Williamson originally drafted the story of slasher tropes with the working title Scary Movie. And frankly, has such a heavy-handed style that I think it would really overpower any director to fill the slot. I think it benefits from having Wes Craven here. You know, both are able to infuse a lot of personality in the film, including jabs at his own previous franchise. Drew Barrymore saying that only the first Nightmare on Elm Street was good and the rest were crap is the level of meta this film kicks off with, and it only goes up from there.
Yeah.
So,
Kind of funny. I kind of like that.
I do. Yeah. Right. I was right there with you. I was like, oh, that's cute. You know, he's doing a jab. The old man shot that I referenced, he turns and like it's an old man janitor, but he has the Freddy sweater on.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, you know.
Yeah. Easter eggs.
All of these go from, oh, that's cute. Oh, that's maybe clever, to annoying and then nauseating. This gets done to death. This gets done beyond. I don't know. I don't have a level of magnitude that this film gets as far as how meta it is and how much it started to annoy me. Scream is a slasher mystery that operates like a whodunit, juggling the audience's expectation of who the killer is. I would also argue this slips into a satire comedy more often than not, but I can understand why it's not directly described as one. It's more so funny in this self-referencing way, but also funny in the way that by the 90s, slashers were kind of funny. It's that concept we talked about last week where a scary movie can be scary because of how extreme it takes it, but that's the same line that may push it towards being something you laugh at because of how ridiculous it is. The killer Ghostface, not to be confused with Ghostface Killer of the Wu-Tang Clan, has a simple Halloween costume getup, but specifically one that lacks any supernatural spin to sell the realism that Ghostface could be anyone picking up the mask. For Sidney Prescott and her teen friends, they are harassed by Ghostface being oddly center-focused in a town full with people. Like I said, I understand you got to write a story. There's already a big group of teens, that are going to be victim to the slasher of this, but it feels oddly like spotlit on just these people. I don't know.
Like no one else is around.
Yeah, there was something I needed.
Neighbors.
I needed the Halloween experience of like, give me the square block. Go do a lap.
That's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
Sydney's tragic past will prove to haunt her, however, as the death of her mother 1 year ago brings in news reporters and suspicion, while once again she lands in the middle of a bloody mess. Folks, this maybe goes without saying, but the writing is the real make or break with this one, and I personally lean towards not digging it to, again, outright hating it. I'll start with some positives here. I feel like it's very interesting how this horror movie awareness of horror movies in the teens creates a level of desensitization in talking about the murders. The bloody details are really like thrown in your face by characters seeming to be like totally unaffected by them, and it was an interesting vibe. I feel like that's where this was good, because this is kind of a commentary on the teens that are just consuming these dime a dozen whores. They know the rules, they know the cliches and whatnot, and being able to talk about what should be like horrific circumstances for these young adults gave the movie an interesting pacing to it. There was an interesting vibe there. I also think the comedy beats kind of work in a teen movie kind of way. I was wondering if there was any pressure to make this PG-13 because there are some moments between the 90s feel of this that I thought might actually work better as a meta horror comedy, despite that first draft of the script being called Scary Movie, somewhere in between the Scary Movie spoof movies and Scream. I feel like there might have been a happy medium. I also get this vibe from Henry Winkler being the principal for some reason. There's a little bit of time with him as the principal, and it's just like, man, this is just way too goofy. It feels like, I don't know, it feels like Halloween Town, or it feels like a Disney movie, Hocus Pocus or some shit.
Wow, that's really funny.
Yeah.
This kind of gives off those vibes, though, I have to say.
Yeah. I would say also probably the best scene is the explanation of, quote-unquote, the rules of the slasher, which goes to show I didn't really think very highly of the kills in this. But, again, I think these are positives to such a self-referencing, such a meta-heavy script. The negatives, on the other hand, while the first couple of scenes using movie lingo and references come off cute, soon the milk really sours on their edition, and it is simply just way too overdone. Like
constant.
My God, beyond. I wouldn't be surprised if there are triple-digit horror movie references in this. And considering every single one is delivered to us through normal dialogue, my eye rolls started causing me blood loss at a certain point. This is taken to such an extreme, and I get that's the point of the movie. I get that it's supposed to be a satire of slashers while still being a slasher, but it was just taken to such an extreme. The fact that these teens, in moments of panic, in a life or death situation, are still throwing in zingers of being like, guess we won't see you for the sequel. And it's just like, please stop.
Man, that really takes you out of it.
Yeah.
That crap is no good.
Yeah.
Because, honestly, at that point, it just needs to be a comedy at that point. You know what I mean? Because then there's no rules.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I think there could be a balancing act here. I think, let's say a horror nut, the quintessential Fandango reader sees this in 96. This is maybe a dream come true project, because it's like, wow, like not only is this a smart script, it gets the horror culture. Let me say as well, kind of on the positive, none of the references it makes are wrong. If anything, they're very smart how they're used and how they are used as zingers sometimes. So I think in 96, watching it during that period on release, there could be some magic. I could feel very differently about this, but watching it modern day, I felt the exact opposite. This was nauseating. Also, when it comes to character logic, I feel like the movie really shoots itself in the foot. Even though the writing might reference the cliches of a slasher, the rules of a slasher, like dumb decisions that will get you killed in real life, it doesn't excuse characters making those same dumb decisions moments moments after spouting the trope for the audience. Like, none of these references are delivered other than dialogue. Dialogue is the main way that we get these. So the fact that the characters are aware that you don't go outside of the locked house, and then it just like they go outside, it's just like it lost me completely. It really lost me.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
It's two different movies, this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is the purpose of the movie, but I just wasn't my bag.
Right.
That last note about characters kind of overrides a lot of the thoughts I had about, I'll be honest, a pretty damn iconic cast on this one.
I think this is the first film that we're getting, like, this was a big time. This was big when it came out.
Absolutely.
Like, you know?
Yeah. Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Matthew Lillard, and my most hated person in the world, Drew Barrymore. Long story on that one, folks. We'll maybe get to it.
It's short for me. I fucking hate Drew Barrymore. I think Drew Barrymore sucks almost in everything except for 50 First Dates.
Okay.
That's a good movie. But I cannot stand. I think Drew Barrymore is one of the biggest lame asses ever.
Yeah, it's. I've always had like a real axe to grind. But
Isn't the Dempsey in this too? Isn't Patrick Dempsey in this?
or
no?
Maybe
He's just showing up in all these clips, and on the red carpet. He was on the red carpet as well.
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't
film.
know. Maybe a future sequel. I'm not sure.
That's probably. You know what? Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. But Courtney, I mean, this is like. Friends is 2 or 3 years in right now.
You're like crazy.
So it's his big time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just real quick too, I'll just say this by far and away did the best in theater.
Oh, this is what you were referring to.
It made $173 million.
Wow.
So for a rated R horror kind of silly slasher film. It's a big deal. Now, it was the biggest budget of $15 million because Saw was under $2 million, which was wild.
And you feel it with Saw.
So
for sure.
this doesn't have the biggest budget to box office, like percentage-wise.
Sure.
But it made the most money by far out of all of these.
Yeah. I think maybe that's a positive because, like I said, you feel the production. This is a higher caliber as far as how the film is made compared to any of the others this week.
It's the longest one.
Yeah.
And this was Bob Weinstein. There was a lot of films coming out. Some of them were doing really well, but it was a cluttered year. So instead of putting it in Halloween or right around end of October, which is what they wanted to, Bob Weinstein scrapped that and decided to do a December release for this film. So this came out December 20th and was a massive hit still.
Wow, go figure.
Yeah.
Go figure. Yeah.
Sorry, back to the cast.
No. I mean,
wretched Drew Barrymore.
Yeah. I really don't have any notes with the acting itself. I was just going to say, really apparently from the success of this film, it kind of helped break the stereotype of horror movies being the last stop on an actor's career. And while I don't doubt the success of Scream, I just don't know if I would single-handedly, give it the credit of like turning horrors from what ends your career as an actor to something that could possibly just be a stepping stone or something very successful as an actor. I personally think it's a more complex question of what role thrillers have side by side with horrors. I think if you jump into the award space, something like Silence of the Lambs probably deserves as much credit as far as like, get a good actor for your horror. It's not going to kill their career.
Right.
For what it's worth, the success of this, that, 100+ million box office, that really what gave Scream its reputation of being a dynamite franchise and what people were excited to be a part of sequels for. Folks, I think this just oozes 90s to a fault, oozes out of the film in every way possible. I'll be honest, I kind of hate it for that. I think the kills are tame. I think the references go from cute to annoying to nauseating. And I can personally only imagine myself enjoying this if I watched it on release in 96, like I said, where this would be a breath of fresh air, but now sounds like the script was written off of Reddit. It really is just like, I don't know. It really hurts in a way because I'm a strong believer if we watch in modern day. And this was one of the more clear-cut cases in a long time that I've had to kind of confront my belief on that. There's no point in watching something in the context of how it came out. You can certainly consider that. That can certainly enrich your experience. But the movie is what it is as you watch it. When we watch that is moving forward is going to be coming off sounding like a Marvel meta multiverse commenting film that I feel like, again, it gets done to death. It is beyond beating the horse to death. It is something else. I frankly have no idea how this got as many sequels as it did, despite it referencing its own sequel in the script. I just really don't know how there's this much mileage out of where this movie goes, where the story ends, and just even Ghostface being a literal costume from a Halloween store.
It's crazy how simple the costume is.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Look at Mike Myers as a mask.
We didn't even,
Freddy is a mask.
I'm just realizing I didn't even mention my Star Trek trivia with Mike Myers' mask being William Shatner. Did you know this?
What?
It's low-hanging fruit. I mean, this is like elementary movie knowledge. Okay.
Way to insult me.
Real quick, the Michael Myers mask is a mold of William Shatner that he made for, I think it was like Twilight Zone or some shit like that.
That's where that mask comes from.
Yeah, so it's William Shatner's face. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. It's okay.
Didn't mean to backhand
It's all good. But going back to this franchise and the success, so like I said, this made 173 million. Second one made 172 million. Third film made 168 million. I mean, it goes down for
God.
because this really goes 1, 2, 3. Like 96, 97, 2000. Then you get a random Scream 4, 2011. And it's 11 years later, Scream 2022.
Yep.
Like we said, it kind of did relatively well.
Sure.
You know, and now 7. Wait, you had the reboot Scream in 22, and then
yes.
and then the next year,
Yep.
Scream 6.
Yep. And that's what's so confusing about this.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, that gets us to the question: would I continue watching the franchise? No, I'm probably going to have to for the podcast in some capacity. But I would say there's maybe some morbid curiosity of what they pull out of their ass to continue Ghostface's legacy. Otherwise, I really wouldn't. I did not enjoy this that much, and I certainly didn't think the concept has mileage for sequels. And really, folks, I don't have the tolerance for whatever self-references it can cook up in the future that are now tying within its own series. I just really don't have the patience for that. At the time of recording, there are only 6 movies in the franchise, with the 7th coming out in 2026. And all one straightforward timeline. I forget, do I have an infographic for this? I do.
It's all pretty
yeah, it's
linear.
one line. It's one line.
Yeah. Meaning each movie, you can just one after the other, where there's no bundling. A lot of the actors are returning. Like,
yes,
it's kind of weird to see. Again, these are the biggest actors we've had. And they kind of stick with the franchise.
Yeah,
and that's cool. Like a lot of these, you look at the Freddy ones, of course those people are...
Right.
It's the gravy train. This is the gravy train. And Courtney Cox doesn't need the Scream movies. She's got enough of that Friends money,
Right. But yeah, there is something here as well that the later sequels will kind of play off of the reunion aspect to this, because it is such an iconic cast. Wes Craven leads his own franchise for, basically this... continuing to direct continuing to direct 2, 3, and 4. And while that might indicate a mark of quality not seen in any of these franchises, and even upcoming with Saw, I can't say it's a good indicator for me. I feel like watching Nightmare on Elm Street, I was on a Wes Craven high.
Right.
Watching this, I'm on a Wes Craven low.
Yeah.
And maybe even makes me say, like, I'm still very curious about New Nightmare, but hearing that that's slightly meta as a lead into what he does in Scream, I don't know. I think that's why it might be a little bit of rough. The most confusing break in this, though, is not in timelines or little island dimensions for the story. The most confusing break is in Scream 5, which is just named Scream.
It's a dipshit name.
But despite that naming, it's not a reboot. It's just the 5th film.
I know, it doesn't.
That's your pet peeve, too.
The namings, like you said, this would drive me crazy. But yeah, I just don't know why everything else is it's Scream 2, Scream 3, Scream 4, Scream, Scream 6, and now we have Scream 7. It's like, what are you doing?
Like, please
You have
stop.
a linear time frame. All the actors are coming back, and now you have 2 of the same named movies in the same timeline.
It's ridiculous.
Oh,
and also,
my God. It's just
not that terribly far apart. You know what I mean?
What do you mean?
I don't know. You look at these other franchises; they span a lot longer of a time period. I feel like.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, but it's just when it comes down to that, it's like I think like it's actually confusing, especially with the returning cast. It's just like, which one is the right Scream? Scream 1 or Scream 5?
Right, can I just start with Scream 2022?
Right.
Because we're starting something fresh and new. And it's like, no. You're in the...
Yeah.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, really dumb. I guess we'll see if I do have a tolerance to continue with the franchise once the newest one comes out. Because, like I said, that the reality is I may have to cover them, on a slow week or something like that, as they come out. But I was not. My skin in the game was not in on this one. I feel like Scream was cute, but something overly annoying. I feel like it's a watch and a recommendation only for real movie buffs. No, I shouldn't say that. Real movie goers, and specifically like if you love horror movies more than anything for their faults, because I feel like the faults of this film can be excused, and that you're gonna have some sort of enjoyment from every reference they pull out of their ass, even if legitimately the amount of references in the films probably exceeds over 100. We're gonna go ahead and give Scream 1996 a 37.
Okay, finally, 37.
Yeah, he's like, where are these scores? He said he didn't like some of them.
I think that's a very fair score.
Yeah.
I think it's an honest, fair score of this film.
That's where I'm coming from. That's where I'm coming from.
Okay, 37% for Scream. I think you have a good detail of who they would be for as well. Okay, and like you said, we're probably going to cover 7 just because it's going to be coming out.
Right.
With that, Finn, let's go to our last film.
There it is.
We're jumping to 2004. It's our latest one in the entry. Did very well, like I said. Under $2 million budget. This made $101, $102 million, $104 million in the box office. Crazy successful. Crazy successful. Also kind of a stacked cast. I told you before we recorded, like I was actually shocked to see some of the names in this film. But this is the OG Saw coming out in 2004. And Vin, get into it. Where do you want to start with this one?
Well, like I said, to be honest, it might not be fair to put this film in competition with the others this week. All of the last films we've covered worked off the same slasher, stalker, nowhere to hide premise, where Saw technically belongs to an entirely different subgenre, the hottest horror of the 2000s, torture porn. Much like Halloween spawned so many copycats, both good and bad, this film has the same mark on horror that it defines a generation to watch increasingly f***ed up circumstances with projects like Hostel, Human Centipede, and many, many more. I decided to keep it in this week because it is truly one of the most successful horror franchises. And even if it may kick off a new generation of horror altogether, I feel like it fit perfectly in the scope of this, of what are the hooks? What's the grab of the first film in each of these massive, massive franchises? James Wan, my arch nemesis, gets his meteoric start in this humble, humble film about chopping your own limbs off. He, of course, goes on to create both the Conjuring and Insidious franchises, massive hits in their own right, and could easily be leaving all of our other directors in the dust because of the success and the dollars that he's brought in with his collaboration with Blumhouse. Saw was originally a short film in 2003, and 1 year later we see him team up with his partner in crime, writer Lee Winnell, to make a full movie out of it. It really cannot be understated how successful this concept was. Saw, as a franchise, has had 10 films made in half the time our other slot this week's had.
Is that true? Because look at Freddy, it's like 81, 82, 83, 84, 85 they're coming out.
Oh, I guess you're right.
Halloween, it's 78, 81, 82.
That's true. The yearly releases I'm forgetting about.
Yeah, bro, they get come out. That's
a good point.
You know
That's
what I
a fair
mean?
point.
I think I would say in the post Y2K, this franchise is on fire more than any other one.
Sure.
But you go back to those original ones where they're almost pumping them out like B movies. This is we've had it before, but this in the modern day era is what we've got. As far as the one, how about this? As far as films that are still coming out, this franchise is pumping them out the quickest now.
True. I like that.
Okay, yeah.
I like that. But really, I mean, Saw was a cultural phenomenon.
Yes.
Its success lies in how it strikes a new type of fear in the viewer that allows them to imagine themselves in these horrific circumstances and what they might do to escape. Saw is part torture horror, part escape room, and part crime mystery, resulting in one of the most iconic films of the 2000s. The vengeful and masochistic Jigsaw traps two poor, unfortunate souls in a room together, chained to the walls, and left to discover a way out. This is Dr. Gordon, played by Cary Elwes. Am I pronouncing that right? Elwes?
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 I would say
it's terrible.
Let's say it's close enough. Cary Elwes, I think is kind of what I say.
There we go.
But do you have, I mean, he's a well-known actor.
Yeah.
I'm just not a fan of kind of any of his stuff.
Sure. Well, we're definitely at odds with him for one specific movie. Folks, if you want to scour the site for what we're talking about, we'll shoot ourselves in the foot on that.
Most recently, he played a character in the latest Mission Impossible movie.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And then the second being Adam, played by Lee Winnell himself, which was interesting. Actually, Lee Winnell had some acting chops here. So I know I shit on him a little bit in the Insidious episode. I actually really enjoyed him here.
Oh, he's heavy in... Wait, he's director of some of these?
Yeah, he's side-by-side writing with James Wan.
That's right. Okay.
Almost nearly every property benefits from producing in that capacity as well, but then eventually with Insidious actually takes over the franchise as far as directing goes.
And then Patrick Wilson comes in, though, for the last one.
Yes. Yeah. We flash in and out of the ongoing investigation into Jigsaw and his horrendous death traps when slowly we start to connect the dots on kind of the self-righteous breadcrumbs of how he chooses his victims. But the real magic is being stuck in the room with our boys as the two play a game, both of Jigsaw's design, but one also created by their own schemes. Only one can get out alive, and information quickly becomes a strategic piece for our characters to pocket in order to up their chances of survival. This was the only franchise that I've actually seen sequels of, and it was an interesting experience knowing how cartoonish and amped up the torture contraptions become in the series. For transparency, I think I've seen Jigsaw from 2017. Bad movie, but had a great date seeing that. I have actually very fond memories of that movie.
Okay.
And Saw X for the podcast, maybe most cartoonish of all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Stripping all the one-upsmanship away from this was kind of refreshing how simple it was. I guess you can kind of probably, in hindsight, say that about any of these, but being the only one that I've experienced a sequel with, it really is just an escape room that you would pay to go to today.
Yeah.
And there's something
With
really
horrible consequences.
electric about that.
Right.
Yeah. There's something electric about the problem solving, and again, much like the magic of Laurie Strode in Halloween being a normal teen girl, a babysitter, an American girl that anyone can kind of step into the shoes of to experience them looking over their shoulders and saying, hey, who's that creepy weirdo I'm catching every now and again?
Right.
Here, there is such a game played with the audience of them imagining what they might do, the extent that they might do to escape. And I feel like, again, that's why these are massive, massive franchises. I think that was also a key to why this week was so enjoyable, because even the quality of the movies was all over the place. There was something here is like, I see why these are moneymakers. I see why they were electric. So.
I don't know if... What do you think about this? Mm-hmm. Would you say that Saw is almost the new Halloween? Because Halloween sparked the past 3 films that we talked about. Mm-hmm. I think Saw is what sparked things like you said, Hostel, Human Centipede, and others.
James Wan's own movies as
well. You know
well.
what I mean? Where I feel like, this started a new secondary franchise, a second subgenre.
Absolutely.
Of this torture horror.
Yeah. And maybe... Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, and I just think like this is where those splatter films, slasher films, are scratching an itch for you horror fans. Mm-hmm. This scratches an untouched itch, and it was the first one to it. It did it relatively well, and that's why it continues to still be successful.
Yeah.
There's a loyalty to the brand almost at this point.
Absolutely.
And I think there's something there. I think it's something to be respected that after all these horror films, after so many decades, this in 2004 struck something new, and then all of a sudden you had copycats left and right.
Oh, absolutely.
But I do kind of feel like it is Halloween, what Halloween did for 2 decades after it.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a subgenre.
I think an alternate version of this special even would be to look at what are the origins of subgenres in horror. So Halloween for slasher. We could maybe look at like Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead for zombie movies.
Oh, yeah, you got zombie. Vampire was huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
True Blood and all that stuff.
Yeah. There are... that's why I even opened it up with, like, it's not quite fair to put Saw in competition with these of, like, what is the best horror franchise out of the week.
Yeah, well, I mean...
I still think, like, it's its own genre and kind of gets graded in a different way because it's aiming for different things.
Yeah.
And not only that, again, kind of lightning in the bottle for what it was able to bring about. In a lot of ways, though, this felt in the legacy of crime thrillers taken to the extremes of a slasher. That crime side is the most half-baked side of the story. The endless loopholes and sloppy writing of how Jigsaw operates will be the downfall of the series, in my opinion. And it really does all start here, because this movie does love its twists. There are also probably a half dozen other films that this takes little details of. This had me thinking about The Cube. This had me thinking about Silence of the Lambs once again, and a few others. And that's where I feel like, once again, it is a crime movie. All of these can have sprinkles of a crime movie involved because it's looking for help and the police get involved. But this one more specifically, in a lot of ways, it's shot like almost like a crime TV show. Think like a CSI in ways, both low budget and everything that represents. There's much more of an emphasis on the crime side of this. We have to find Jigsaw. We have to get to the bottom of this rather than just survive per se, like a slasher. The contraption sequences we do get that are stylized and kind of blown out in their imagination have a very distinct 2000s feel to them, filled with digital effects and very, very heavy-handed edits, speed-ups, zips arounds. You can tell we're in the 2000s for sure. Ryan Grutter has been the editor for nearly the entire series and eventually goes on to direct a few himself. It really is one of the most defining features of the film, though. Sure, the gore, the traps, very iconic. But I'm telling you, the key to a Saw movie is the frenzied panic on screen that sells the death trap itself. I fully admit, it's simultaneously a black eye on the film. Pretty much any sped-up scene looks really bad, like really, really bad. There's a driving scene between two characters, Danny Glover being one of them, and it's just like, oh boy, this looks like a YouTube video. It looks like an early YouTube video too. But I don't know. I think it does get a slight pass because it's not only Wan's first film. I think I would have to watch a lot more early 2000s films specifically to settle my opinion on these digital effects, but it really does feel in the DNA of what Saw is. That these frantic scenes, I don't know, to play them straight and to not have the kitchen sink of editing effects thrown into them.
Yeah.
Basically everything you have in iMovie and Windows Movie Maker combined. There is something that is the identity of these death contraption scenes. The death traps, if they were just filmed straight, I don't know. It may not be as electric. It may not capture the same type of horror that is the ticking clock, Jigsaw giving you instructions, and a person screaming, trying to get out of the trap. There's something to these, heavy-handed editing tricks that actually make the experience. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. Not to take away from, I think, the biggest draw, which is what you touched on in the beginning of the review. Everyone who's watching is putting themselves in the person's place and saying, what would I do with this task, or what would I do to get out of this?
How would I escape?
Yeah, you can't undersell that.
Yep.
That's kind of your buy-in for the film almost.
Absolutely. I don't actually have any formal notes on acting, but off of the legacy of Scream, this guy's a pretty good cast. Danny Glover is an unusual pull.
Bro, if Danny Glover's in a film, it's... he has no right being in this film. He's better than this film.
Partner again?
Partner again?
This is...
There's actually a great scene where, let's say his partner meets an early demise, and we should just edit that partner again into it.
Here's the thing with Danny Glover. Any film that he's in, he's always a badge and a gun is Danny Glover.
Oh,
He does a lot more, but still,
He's...
between Lethal Weapon, Predator, and this, he could just the same character.
He needed to sweat more. He needed those Predator 2 sweat stains. I again, it don't really have formal notes on it, but our boy, we both enjoyed him from Lost. What's his name?
Michael Emerson.
Yeah,
and I just know him as Linus. Wait, was his name Linus in Lost?
Linus in Lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really solid. And again, I can't believe I'm saying this, and I didn't listen back to our Insidious episode, but I know I kind of shit on Lee Winnell, but he might be the best actor here.
Okay.
His scenes in the room, you can tell there is, I don't know, maybe a connection to the material, that he knows the desperation he has to sell. You really did just a great job. And again, capturing that magic between the two of them, that they are... It's an onion. There's multiple layers to the game. It's not only how do we escape. It's not only are we playing into Jigsaw's game, are we beating him at his game. Then there's another game of how do we get one over on each other. What is the mental game of what do I tell you as far as information? I found something in the room. Do I share that right away? Do I pocket that? Phenomenal. Really, really great. And that's where I kind of wrap up on this one, folks. There is really some magic to this film, and it's all in that room with our two guys figuring out how to escape. Something so grounded about this setup that I just love. You know, obviously, it's a feature-length story. We need the investigation. We need flashbacks, yada, yada. But that's all where the flaws of the movie, I felt, came into play. The dream for me would be a fan edit or some sort of alternative edit to cut this down to all be in that room. Ramp up the mind game, make it maybe a tiny bit shorter. I think that would be, again, like talked about with Nightmare on Elm Street, kind of dream project for me. That's my dream Saw, just really, really tight, all in one room. Would I continue watching this franchise? I don't know. Let's take a look at this timeline. This is a really a mixed bag. Saw does some timey-wimey bullshit. Actually, the one that we covered, Saw 10? No. Yeah, Saw 10 is actually the next sequential sequel after this one.
What?
So we watched movie 2, technically, on the podcast. Very weird. Jigsaw, I don't know if you see what's going on here. Jigsaw is split in two, I guess taking place half as a prequel, but half as the one of the last in the franchise or in the timeline. But if you look at this note right down here, all of this happens within a year span. I'm talking like 4 movies all happen within a year. Yeah. And then, of course, at the very end of the timeline is that Spiral movie, which tried to do bait and switch, pull the rug, saying that it was its own horror franchise. And it's just like, nope, actually, it's a Saw movie. Unreal. This is exciting because I've actually seen where this goes.
Right.
Unlike anything else, since we reviewed Saw 10 on the podcast. And once again, that is the next chronological sequel of this film franchise. And I can tell you, it's not great. Saw 10 was really, really bad, actually. Once again, 10 movies with the 11th coming out in 2025. So, like Scream, we'll return to this in some capacity. I don't know if I'm really going to do a deep dive into this or like Saw 10, just kind of cover the movie.
Yeah.
There's a mix-up here in placing sequels in different order on the timeline, which I think at first can lean into the strengths of this movie being a crime, a little bit more of a crime thriller mixed in with everything else it is. The escape room, the body torture, things like that. My desire to continue watching this is less and less because I know that it becomes just a one-upsmanship to create crazier and crazier contraptions or outdo the previous one.
Yeah.
And I can't stress enough, what works in this is how stripped down it is. There's no crazy contraption in that room. They got a saw. That's it. They're changed against the wall. There's no, we in these flashbacks in the crime investigation, we see Jigsaw's death traps and more inventive stuff. That's fine. But I'm telling you, what works is putting us in that room.
It's the simplicity of it. Yep. Yeah. It's the simplicity. Yeah.
Absolutely. I don't know. I'm really happy I watched this. It gave me an appreciation for James Wan. I know I said he was my arch nemesis, and he still is. But he was able to pull this off at such a young age, and it was able to capture such an electricity. I really do respect the guy a little bit more after watching this. The reality is, I enjoyed this like a great episode of TV, like a killer little episodic show, a Black Mirror, a Twilight Zone, that all takes place in this tense little room. That's a once and done premise for me. Like Scream was a once and done premise. I just don't know if I could say it's really worth having all this different expansion of the story and Jigsaw and all where this story goes in this franchise, just to have less effective, tense moments between these two characters. It's something that I want to check out the short story or the short film for, because I feel like that's maybe my dream of the chopped down edit. But I guess you could really say these qualities of strength. I guess you could really say that about all of these films in the franchise having their best first, and I think that's even more true here. We're going to go ahead and give Saw 2004 a 70 on the dot.
Wow, 70%. Yeah. And you know what? I tell you what, I think you hit it right on the money, Vin. Yeah. I think Saw would be better as a TV, and you had 10 of these already. You cut these down to cut them down to an hour long, and you have 10 episodes.
Sure.
That would be interesting.
The crime aspect of it already feels like CSI, like in a bad way.
That is wild, actually. That could totally work. That totally makes more sense.
I guess it's just
especially if the first 4 films or first 5 films are within a year of each other.
Yeah,
like as far as like in the timeline goes.
Right.
Who cares if it's rated R? Put on HBO.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, come on.
We get some 24 vibes. It's all, it's Jack Bauer only has so much time to catch a Jigsaw.
But a 70%, I like that you were. There's enough here. You were almost excited about this one a little bit.
Yeah. This was a good watch. I did not regret watching this, and like I said,
closest to Halloween too. I'm telling you, there's something about this is the Y2K Halloween.
True. Also, we are coming up on the 20th anniversary of this.
Well, yeah, we were in the 20th. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
that happened last week.
Oh, that's last week. Oh, late to the bunch.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. No, this is coming out. This came out like 2 days ago, technically.
Oh, okay.
It's 20 years, a day or two ago.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. So but yeah, that is the run through. That was my spooky filled week. Something else.
So I had mentioned it just once before. Are most of these? Is it abhorrent to say that these are B movies?
Aha. No, I think that's totally fine. Actually, if anything, Scream is the only one that's probably not a B movie because the production, it feels like Wes Craven is at almost not the end of his career, but he's got momentum in his career.
Right, and the cast in that one.
Yeah,
I mean that cast is almost bigger than Saw.
Yeah,
just because you've got some heavy hitters at the time. So okay, all right. What film was actually the most scary?
Oh, that's got to be Nightmare on Elm Street. I think Nightmare on Elm Street.
The dream sequences.
Yeah, and there's something to it. Like, Freddy also kind of gets the crown as far as like boogeymen this week, because it's
even more than Jigsaw.
Oh yeah, because Freddy has a lot
presence.
of power.
He has presence too. Yeah, Jigsaw is kind of just more the ominousness. Of that character.
Like if you get caught by Jigsaw, maybe you're in a worse scenario. Freddy's still going to torment you for probably like a week straight in your dreams before actually killing you. Where Jigsaw, the clock's ticking. But again, with Freddy, it's like you nod off for a second, the hand's in the scene.
Right.
And it's like, wow, that's cool.
Which film would you want to direct the most?
Oh, that's got to be Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
I just would, man.
You could have some fun with it.
Yeah, I just think it'd be tough because I would want to watch the rest of the franchise in the sense of like I wouldn't want to step on toes of types of kills, but it's just it's an open palette of anything you can do and could be done better.
Right.
Yeah.
And now you had made said if anything, Halloween opens itself up to being like, oh, we could have more sequels here.
Yeah.
Which one out of all of these deserves a second film?
Ooh, deserves a second film.
Like these movies, even if Scream is shit, like does it? Like which one of these actually deserves its second film where there's enough juice in the can?
Out of these, probably Saw.
Okay, because I was going to say, I mean, I only watched Halloween, and I would be shocked if you said Halloween.
Yeah.
Halloween's almost annoying, kind of, actually, how it ends.
Yeah, that's what I commented on. Like, everyone's praise about Halloween was just like, oh, but it wasn't intended to be, sequel bait, or it wasn't intended to be a franchise back then. I mean, come on.
Yeah, come on. Get out of here on ass. But you're thinking Saw.
Yeah, I think we Saw, there's something there, especially with the crime investigation already. Like, we're kind of coming into it ongoing.
Yeah.
And we flash back to 2 or 3 different contraptions that the cops have found, the aftermath of his of Jigsaw. So I think that's just like, that also makes sense why that series plays with timelines rather than different, I should say that series plays with time placement rather than timelines. We're always shifting around of like, where in Jigsaw's life is this, rather than this is a spin-off. This is a different type of Jigsaw or something like that.
Right. Okay, so that works. There's something to this, though, that kind of think that Nightmare on Elm Street as well would be good for that, and almost sequel-ish, because Freddy can just easily torment, because you're dealing with dreams, and you kill off Freddy, but you don't really need to kill off Freddy because he's a mind virus almost. I get It vibes
Oh, yeah.
from Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit, and it could just be like, just the It clown can target and torment kind of whoever. Everyone's susceptible.
Yeah.
Susceptible? Susceptible.
Yeah.
Each movie could just be a new band of characters or some type of common thread, some type of through line per the film, because he reminds me of the clown a little bit.
Yeah, Pennywise.
Yes.
Both feed off of fear as well.
Right.
Pennywise a little bit more directly. That's how he eats. He feeds off the fear of children. But you're absolutely right. And especially you hit the nail on the head, because both hit that 80s goodness that the kids are on their own. They have to think, they have to come up with how they're going to kill the monster.
Right.
That's very, the very Stranger Things vibe to it.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, I love that these movies were like open, not available, but you know what I mean. We didn't cover these movies before. I think this was a blast.
They weren't on the site. Yeah.
Because you're right. Because one thing I was thinking of, it's like, we could do Poltergeist next time, but we kind of covered it. Was it Poltergeist? What's one? I always ask this. The horror film with the boxes, with the box.
Oh, with the box. Oh, a Hellraiser.
Yes, Hellraiser. Like
with the box.
Because Hellraiser's another
the least defining feature of Hellraiser.
But you know it every time.
Yeah, I do.
But Hellraiser is that thing where it's been rebooted before.
Yeah.
There's been like almost 10 films in the franchise. But we covered some of those, I believe.
Yeah,
and they're on the site, some of them.
Absolutely.
But there's more juice in here. There's other films here.
I think so. To
jump off of. Or even it could be, I don't know, there's so much fun we can have with these Halloween specials. I kind of dig expanding on this a little bit. What was the first vampire movie? What was the first what was the biggest creature feature? There's something like that. There's so much in this genre.
Yeah.
Because there's so many subgenres within this.
Absolutely.
Within just horror,
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, hopefully later on in the year, when I cover Nosferatu, we can kind of get down to the vampire DNA of that a little bit. How this is covered slasher extensively. We touch on, torture horror. Our zombie special, going back a little bit, folks.
Yeah, big time.
That's obviously studying, the zombie on screen,
which was great. That's a graph.
Yeah. So I'm hoping Nosferatu. I mean, other than covering the original Nosferatu, we get a little that same vibe, that same goodness of like, this is enriching to return to in some way and see how it's a stepping stone, but why it's also kind of maybe good to watch now still.
And I think, like you said, Saul's kind of the outlier here. I still, like I said from the very beginning, these remind me of, I just see this as popcorn scary. It's mainstream a little bit. It's just something about it is different than that Texas Chainsaw Massacre in my mind.
Yeah,
for these.
True.
And these all do kind of fit in that. Even Saul.
Yeah.
It's just a popcorn horror movie kind of.
And also shows in the score, because Texas Chainsaw was a phenomenal movie.
You did a hell of a lot of work here, Vin, this week on this one. I love the notes. The infographic, I don't want to, I'm sorry if I didn't compliment you enough on the infographics. It's just no one else is going to be able to see them, but you made very good looking infographics. I don't even know what program you used, honestly.
I'm going to have to, we'll maybe post them on the socials to get some, a reading companion with the podcast.
So with these films, with these franchises, Vin, anything you want to end on or touch on, lasting notes to leave us with, or what would you like to do here?
I thought this was just a great October. I got to a lot of horror movies. The list has dwindled pretty significantly. I got some big gaps in the list. But also at the same time has scratched an itch. I think, to your delight, music to your ears, I might be good on some horror movies for a little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the American's populace isn't, because it seems like there's one coming out every single week in theaters.
For real.
But when it comes to the older stuff, that's good that you're kind of hitting stuff that you wanted to hit.
Yeah, like all-timers are just like, I need to watch this. And then also for the podcast, like, we need to get it on the site. You know what I mean? Crucial
That feeling
watches.
of, yeah.
So
But the list is not zero still. There's still some babies on there.
it's not even 10, not even 20. It's still long.
Excellent, Vin. Vin, thank you so much for putting so much extra effort here for a great special. Really appreciate the watching and the notes for this week. Folks, just a quick reminder that if you like what we're doing here, remember that we're completely producer supported. So we're not advertiser based supported. We're not going to deal with Patreon where you need to pay a certain amount to get extra content. All of the content of the Daily Ratings is out there for free on the podcast and website. But the idea is, if you're finding it valuable, if you're finding it useful and enjoying yourself here, could you send some value back to us? It's called the value for value model. And if you go to thedailyratings.com and head to the donations tab, and through your donations, you become an actual legitimate producer of the Daily Ratings, and you get to show what value that you're getting. So everybody's finances are different, and it's different from week to week for you. So no matter a donation that's sent in, big or small, $5 to $500, it all matters so much to us, so dearly to us. You have no idea. Yeah, I mean, to all the producers we've had in the past, we thank you so much. And again, if you want to be a producer, just head to the donations tab at the Daily Ratings. If you're listening to the podcast, stopping in once in a while when there's a movie you care about, you sit down to watch a movie and you're checking out our site, or is this movie worth a watch or not? And you listen to Vin's quick review, 15 minutes or so. Again, that's value in your pocket. Can you send us value back in our pocket? We appreciate you all so much. Vin, appreciate you stopping here tonight for a great special, great homework, man. We'll run down these scores one more time. We have the OG Halloween with a 72%, Friday the 13th with a 51%, A Nightmare on Elm Street with a 66%, Scream with a 37%, and finally, Saw with a 70%. So, folks, it's always a blast, and as always, we'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast.